March 1st, 2023, and this week there were 163 reported cases of COVID-19 in Charlotte-Mecklenburg County, which shows a 15% decrease over the last 2 weeks. Therefore, each subject is comfortable not to wear a mask. Okay, so the purpose of the Living Archive Project is to gather, preserve, and share local history, stories, documents, visual imagery, and memories about the COVID-19 pandemic and its impact on Black, Hispanic, Asian, Indigenous, and other minority communities in Mecklenburg County by means of audio and/or visual recorded interviews, documents, photography, and written work. The Night School here at Queens is partnering with them to help conduct 6 interviews per group, which will fulfill the community service portion for our Capstone class. So I'm Lily Fry. I am a senior graduating in May here at Queens with a communications major and an international studies minor.
Hi, my name is Kaya Shumafonde Scarborough. I'm a senior at Queens as well, major communications, minor sports management, and will be graduating in May.
Okay. And then you can go ahead and introduce yourself.
Okay, so I'm Giulia, and I'm a senior here at Queens. I'm majoring in sport and exercise science, and also minoring in health science and sport management.
And then also, you can look at either one of us. If you want to look at the camera, you can. You can look at Kai, you can look at me, whatever makes you feel most comfortable. So the first thing I'm going to have you do is kind of describe your physical image. So if someone couldn't see this video and they were only hearing audio, how would you describe your appearance to somebody?
I will say athlete, definitely, and then female. Young adult.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then just kind of tell us a little bit about what's on your hand map. Maybe starting with like who you feel like surrounds you and supports you. And then maybe talking a little bit about like what you put related to the COVID pandemic in terms of like what you think when you hear it, but also kind of what you gained from that.
Okay, so starting from the COVID first thing, the first thing that came to my mind was like uncertainty, economic crisis, and insecurity. I'll say just because it was something that was completely like nobody was expecting that and nobody really had an experience with that. So definitely uncertainty on like what was gonna be in the future, and a little bit of insecurity as well, because like when you don't really know what is gonna happen, you don't even know like how you're gonna plan ahead and stuff like that. So like I would say the routine was a little bit different than usual. And then I put economic crisis just because I feel for everybody sort of it was impacted a little bit more, a little bit less, but overall, yeah. And for the support part, I wrote like as physical people, we can say it's my family first, because they definitely like were like my main like pillars for support, especially during that time. And then I would say my team, just because during the pandemic, so my freshman year, I was not at Queens. I was in another college, another big college. And during the pandemic, they basically kicked me out of the team, out of like nowhere. So basically like during the pandemic, I needed to choose what to do. And that was like not an easy choice. And like I found like a second family that was, even through the difficult times that the COVID-19 pandemic was, they were still able and open to welcome me into their new family. So the team is the second after my family. And then I put like some ideas and stuff, which is dream job, just because if you have a goal, even if it's like a long reach goal, most of the times it helps you like to keep focus, even on a daily basis, even when you're sort of like uncertain. And then I put optimism and hope, just because I feel you need to be optimistic of what's gonna happen, and you cannot expect anything, but you need to be hoping for that. So
Gotcha. I'm gonna take a couple steps back just to get some more information. But where were you born?
I was born in Italy.
Okay. And then where would you consider home for you right now?
Like here in the US, you mean?
Here in the US, if it's back home, whichever.
So definitely, if I really had to like call home, it's in Italy. But right now, of course, I'm living here, and it's still like a sort of second home feel.
Okay. How long have you been in Charlotte?
This is my third year.
Okay. Where were you when you found out about everything that was going on with like the pandemic? Like what was going on in your life at that time?
So when the whole thing started, I was still back in Florida as a freshman in my previous university. And it was kind of crazy because, nobody was expecting that. And can I kind of like dig a little bit more just to explain?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah,
Okay. Because I don't know like if
whatever.
it's okay. So basically like it all happened all of a sudden because like literally we were practicing. The whole team was practicing. And at some point they just stopped us in the middle of the practice and they told us, okay, so these are the news. This is a new thing that is happening about COVID and stuff like that. So nobody really knew what it was. It was like, okay, we're stopping practice right now. Just go back to your dorms. We still don't know when we're gonna be able to train again. And that was pretty much the beginning of it. And then I felt like from there on, it was just, stuff I was like rushing all one after the others and sort of like in the worst. Just because then most of the people were starting, once it became clear it was like a pandemic and like the first restriction or rules were starting to be applied, lots of people in the dorms were just going back home. But I was personally not able to because at that point, the United States like put some bans on the countries. Mm-hmm. And for my specific one, I was not able to go back home. So I needed to stay there. But at some point, at the dorm, they said because of the restriction, they were not allowing people at the dorms, but it was the only really place I was supposed to stay. So I managed to find like an apartment to rent just because people were going away back home. So that was okay. So like I moved by myself because nobody was there anymore. Mm-hmm. And then I stayed there with like a roommate. I didn't know her at the beginning, but we were pretty fine together. The only thing was like she usually worked at night and I usually worked during the day because I was still doing classes, but like at that moment, like the huge economic crisis began, especially back home and especially for my family. So I needed to work instead of just part-time, full-time. So I started working full-time and still doing classes online. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, still trying to sort of keep myself fit since I was still an athlete in a way. Mm-hmm. So I would say that was probably my hardest moment because like all things coming together, like I was not able to go back home was something completely unexpected. I was still worried for like my family and stuff. Mm-hmm. And I would say like sort of like all the tiredness from that period because I was like sleeping very few hours every night, like 2 to 3 hours, just because I was working the whole day, then I was coming for classes or like during work, I was like connecting for Zoom and like listening to the classes and stuff like that. But then like I was taking lots of credits at that point and I was also doing labs. So usually like when I was going back home one night, I was doing homework or like studying or like doing like the experience for my labs and stuff like that. So that's why like I was not sleeping that much. And then like I'll say after 2 to 3 months that I was still doing this. So It was kind of like a tiring pace of living. Basically like my coaches asked me, we need to do a video call, like all of a sudden. Like they didn't like reach out to me through the whole time during that moment. And I tried to like reach out back to them and stuff, but they never responded to me. And then they came out with that, we need to like have this Zoom meeting. I was like, okay, fine. And they basically told me, you're out of the team because, there are several reasons that I'm not going to like say all of this now, but the main reason was because the swimming program had like funding cuts. So like their smart way to like save money was cutting people with scholarship, and most of the people with scholarship are international students. Mm-hmm. So they were like literally like straight to my face. They said, "We're sorry, but you're out of the team." And like from there on, they literally like draw me out like every single thing. So I still needed to like finish classes just because the semester was not like, because I was done with the spring semester, but I was also taking classes during the summer because literally a little bit before they told me you need to take those classes in order to be on track with your major and stuff. So yeah, I had to finish the classes for the summer semester, but they literally told me like mid-June, and the application for most of the colleges, including Queens, was gonna end up at the beginning of July. So like I found myself like those 2 weeks were probably the worst, probably on my entire life as of right now, because I literally found myself like, what am I supposed to do? Because like, of course, the feeling was like I want to go back home because like that's a total disaster right now. But I was not able to go back home. And also I was like, if I'm going back home, everything that I've done here so far is worthless. So I'm like, but what am I supposed to do then? Because we're in the middle of pandemic, I'm working full time. I'm still doing summer classes. I'm doing this and this. And now I don't even like, you know. So I was like, okay. So I try and like reach out to so many colleges and stuff, and they also reach out to me because of course I was still like a D1 athlete at that moment, so I was kind of like a good choice. And I've done like several Zoom meetings because at that point usually you're supposed to do like a recruit trip, but of course during the pandemic it was not allowed, so we were just doing like Zoom meetings and stuff. But like all of those like meetings did not really I'll say excited me or like made me decide like where to go, just because pretty much everybody and like several D1 schools reached out to me at that point, and like they were all talking about like money and stuff like that. So they were like, oh yeah, we can give you like a full scholarship, or like, oh yeah, definitely with the scholarship you're like very valuable athlete and so on. But like they were just talking about numbers and stuff because basically based on your times, your whatever, your results. So it was like, it was cool, definitely, but at the same time, it was like, it does not really convince me because all of them were like just seeing me like as a number, as like a performance on the paper, and that was all. And then the only D2 school that reached out to me was Queens. At the beginning, to be honest, I was a little bit, you know, doubtful just because I was coming from a D1 reality. So I was not really sure if like a D2 was like a good fit for me, but it was like, I'll give it a try anyway. And I literally feel like the very first thing that like the coaches asked me was like, so since we know you're an international student, how are you doing? How's your family doing back home and stuff like that? So like first they talk about all the personal stuff, and then eventually they start talking about like the program and stuff like that. So I don't know, it was probably like because I was already like in a very bad spot at that moment, but sort of like something clicked in my head. I was like, I don't know, like, you know, when like you have that gut feeling, you're like, yeah, that's, I don't know, I'm convinced that's the path I'm supposed to go. So I was like, I started like also saying that this to my parents and stuff, and like we started like reaching back and forth again with the coaches here and stuff like that. And literally in 2 weeks I made the decision to move here. So in 2 weeks, like literally like lease out like the apartment I was there and stuff like that. And I needed like to drop back from like some classes and stuff because I was already registered for the fall for the next year and stuff like that. And then here, same thing. I needed a place to stay because at that moment of the pandemic, people were not allowed to stay on campus. So I needed to find a place like a side campus. And then I needed, you know, to like move here. So I packed everything, and then like traveled here, and then I chose classes and so on. So it was like, I'll say like probably those were like the 2 worst weeks so far, just because like everything was like all packed, and like I needed to do all by myself because of course my family was supporting me 100%, but they don't really speak English that well. So like it's a little bit, you know, a barrier like right there. And also like, how could like they reach out to places here if they live back home? So yeah. So they definitely supported me, but most of the things I needed to do it by myself, like completely. So I would say that was definitely a very hard challenge for me, mentally, physically, emotionally, and stuff like that. because it was like I need to count on my own and only like on myself, if this makes sense. So it's like, yeah. And still, while I was like moving on and stuff like that, I was still like working full time, doing classes because the summer semester was not over yet, and all this stuff. So like all together at the same time. So yeah. Mhm.
What did like an average day look for you when it comes to like school, working, and if you don't mind, like where were you working? Because obviously during the pandemic, it was harder and harder to work, and I know that obviously Florida is going to have different restrictions than North Carolina did, and vice versa, and everywhere. But kind of like, where were you working at the time? What were you doing? But also, what did like an average day look like for you?
Like back then, like back
Yeah,
in the
back
days.
then, yeah,
Okay. So
During,
I was
during COVID.
yeah. Okay, got it. So I was working as a swimming instructor. So I was like giving lessons to children, and it was like so usually my typical day back then, it's crazy to think about it right now, but so I was usually like getting up at like around 4 a.m. ish, just because I want to like to work out a little bit before actually going to work. So I was working out like from like 90 minutes to like 2 hours ish, and then getting breakfast, and then going to work, which it depended like from day, but like it was from 8 to 10 hours depending on that. So it was like usually starting from like 8-ish, 7:30, 8-ish, and then I was done either like at 6 p.m. or like at 8 p.m. And usually in the meantime, they were like, the people that were allowing me to do like the swimming instructor, they were like quite flexible, so I had to thank them as well. Because like, of course, during the day I had classes, even if they were on Zoom. So sometimes like if I had classes, I just like put my earphones in, and then I was like giving lessons and stuff. So, and that was the day. And then like was coming back home like at 8 p.m. I usually like had dinner, and then that was the time for studying, the only time for studying. So depending on the homework, since I was taking several labs, and also like the classes were, since I was a freshman, they were like biology, chemistry, and stuff like that with all their labs. So like it's like classes that needs time to like in order to like go well, right? So yeah, usually like it took me at least several hours to do that, especially if I needed to do the labs, because at that point we were not allowed to like to do labs in the like college labs, but like at home. So like I needed to like sort of like create an environment right for the labs, and that was taking a lot of time. And so yeah, like usually I was like studying and stuff, or like doing whatever other chores that needed to be done up to like midnight, 1 a.m., stuff like that. And then I was going to bed for roughly 3 hours. And that was like this it lasted for like 2 to 3 months.
Gotcha.
Mhm.
How do you think your experience then with that kind of schedule and everything that you went through within that time period, but also even those 2 weeks when you were transferring schools, how do you think like those experiences have now transferred over into like your present day life?
So definitely those days gave me like more confidence. I feel like I always said that sort of like self-reliance and like independence. Is that right?
Mhm.
Okay. But I would say that basically like now that I think about it, I would say definitely those days gave me like sort of like proof that I can like do a lot. It may be like very stressful, but like I can like reach out, like I can like go to those limits as well if I need to like push myself, if there's a need to. And I'll say also like sort of like self-grace. I learned like a lot of self-grace back then, because of course like I was definitely not in my best emotional and
That's the next question I was gonna get into. You definitely have like a unique point of view because you're an international student and stuff like that. Like, how did it feel going through the pandemic and kind of doing it alone? Like everybody went home, everybody was able to be not be scared with their families. In a sense, it was comfortable, but like you did this all by yourself, and like you said, you couldn't go home. There was barriers. Like, how did that feel? Where were you mentally?
It was definitely, I wouldn't lie, it was definitely a sort of like dark spot because of course, like I was still back then 19 and I always been like independent, but like always with the idea that if I want, I can go back home. So it was not like something that it was not possible at all. And especially like in a situation where you're like not prepared and not expected, I'll say it's kind of hard because like usually it's kind of natural for everybody. Like when like trial comes or like, challenges comes, the first thing you do is like go where you feel most like the safest. And most of the times it could be home, it could be anywhere else, but like for me it was definitely home, and that was the only place I was not able to go. So yeah.
When did you finally get to go home for the first
I
time?
waited 1.5 years because even if the pandemic was almost over, but the bans over Italy was not over yet. I don't know why, because for other like nations, the bans were released, but not for Italy. So like it got better over time. So like maybe they were saying, yeah, you can travel to Italy, but then they were saying if you go to Italy, then you cannot go back here. And that was an issue because I was still an athlete. I still had like in-person classes and stuff. So like I did not have that privilege to say, okay, even if I'm like staying here until they will open up all the travels, it will be fine. So yeah, I waited like 1.5 years before going back home.
Gotcha. I'm not sure if I have anything else. Do you have anything else that you want to ask?
I guess like you said, like the bans and stuff and the ongoing like, okay, 1 minute we're banned, next minute we're not. What was that like, the process of just basically come and go of the restrictions and stuff like that? Like how did that make you feel in the moment?
I would say like for the bans for back home, it was kind of like nerve-wracking a little bit just because they were literally changing day by day. And like having those feelings of like uncertainty was like, because usually I prefer like a direct response instead of like, wondering what's going on. And definitely at that point it was like the time where like nobody really knew what, because like I was reaching out to like so many people, like even the embassy and stuff like that, to know more, but they even didn't know what was supposed to be, or like they were saying, yeah, today it's like this, tomorrow it's not necessary, like so like even if we're seeing like the trend getting better, but even maybe like the next day was already getting worse again, so like the restrictions were back again. So it was like a situation where we were like, maybe right now I can go back home, but not necessarily next week. So what I'm gonna do, like, am I gonna risk it? And in this case for my visa, it was not worth the risk.
Gotcha. I guess a follow-up question to that would be, having had that experience, would that affect your opinion on living in the United States more long-term? Or would you rather move back home?
So
Closer to home, I guess is the best way to put it.
I would say on this perspective, like I really don't mind. Like even staying here is not an issue for me, even if in the past it has been, an issue going back home, just because like I feel like trying to like fulfill my dream job is like more important and like very good, because like now I know that like I can go back home if I want to. So it's like I don't let this like get in the way of like pursuing what I'm trying to achieve. So yeah, I wouldn't mind either way.
Do you have anything else?
I think Giulia did a great job.
Yeah.
She did everything.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
I mean, if you ladies have any other questions.
Do you have anything else you want to add about your time during COVID, or just kind of how you've transitioned out of that? Obviously, there is still a pandemic. COVID cases still exist.
Yeah, definitely.
But is there anything else you want to add? If there isn't, no worries. But
I would say definitely like things got better now. In general, like health-wise and stuff. But I would say we can still see around us like sort of like the side effects, like the long-term side effects. Like I would say like in society in general, but also like in every single one of us, like personal life and personal stuff. I would say that like for me personally, I still have like this long-term effects, especially like regarding my family, because like pre-pandemic we were already like sort of in a unstable economical situation, just because we had a crisis back home, like our country had economic crisis. And so we were already sort of struggling, but still not too bad.
Mhm.
This makes sense. And I would say that like the pandemic really got like, you know, the final, I don't know how to say that, but like the final
icing on the cake for you guys.
yeah, right. So I started working part-time since I was 16 and until now, because we were already sort of struggling. But like literally starting from the pandemic, it got worse in that sense. So like I sort of like needed to like take more ownership and responsibility also for my family. So like, for example, like right now, even if it doesn't look like too bad, and of course we're not in the worst spot, because definitely during the middle of the pandemic was definitely the worst. But like for example, right now my both my parents are working full time, and here I'm working 3 jobs on top of like being an athlete and being a student. And so I can say like we're still not in a position where we can like feel comfortable economically speaking. And plus on the top of that, like my mom is having like in the past few years a few like health issues and stuff. So like the doctors have said that like the best solution for her, like not to get better, but like not, at least not to get worse on her like health situation, is like stop working. So she's supposed to quit her job basically, but right now we're like not in the position to do that. So I'll say like I sort of like feel also the responsibility to that, because basically like if I start working full time for real, she will be eventually able to quit her job. So like they never really pressure me to anything, because of course like they know what it means. They already know like I'm already like with all my full busy schedule. But like I can, like when you grow up, like same for my sister and stuff like that, like you kind of like get more mature, and like even if your parents don't tell stuff, like you kind of like understand what's behind the scene. And so like you feel also kind of like the responsibility to like help. So yeah. So let's see how it goes.
I think my last thing would be if 100 years from now, kind of what we've gone through in the last couple of years was to happen again, what would your one piece of advice be to someone?
Especially if that's international, and that was your position.
I see. Definitely, I will go back to like be like giving yourself like some sort of grace, just because I know that like people always like set high expectation on them, especially when it comes to athletes. Like it's like already sort of in our mindset a little bit that like you need to be the best, you need to be the fastest and stuff like that. So like your expectation, I'm like 24/7 always on that spot. And when it comes to challenges, usually like you're able to overcome them, but not necessarily with the greatest results, if this makes sense. So I would say that if this happens again, definitely like being aware, like to give yourself some grace, just because it might not like ended up like with the best result, or like the result that you were aiming to, but at least you got through that. And that's like at the end of the day what really counts. So
Cool. Well, do you have anything else? Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, no
much.
problem.
That was